Welcome back, everybody. Dean Lloyd Consulting Company. Today I invited you on because I've got Nicole Obrigavitch. Hopefully, I said that correctly, as we were just laughing earlier. So, Nicole, can you just give us a little bit of insight into what you're doing now and who you are, please?
Yeah, for sure. So I am currently the executive director of a nonprofit organization that supports women that are criminalized or are at risk of criminalization. And basically, we provide a lot of supports around. When I first stepped into my role, it was more sort of on the back end. We were providing like court support and doing bail programming and doing institutional in-reach, that type of thing. But I've, in the last 18 months, sort of shifted into diversion programming because once people have been institutionalized, you have a whole new set of issues to deal with. And so that's where our focus is these days.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that little
Yeah.
insight. And if I am correct, have you experience of the justice system, personal experience, inherent understanding is what I like to label it as now?
Yes, absolutely. So my story is kind of weird and I'll just kind of do a redacted version.
Yep.
But I was previously a lawyer and I found myself in a very abusive relationship and was coping with that relationship with substances. And I basically went from booze to drugs. And because I'm sort of high level on the next level with everything, I started trafficking. So I was disbarred and then I got busted for trafficking and I ended up with a 3.5 year federal prison sentence.
Thank you for sharing that. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Sorry, I just threw that on you too. So thank you for just being as open, as honest as you can. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. So can you just let's try and start back at the beginning again.
Okay.
Can you remember your first job? What was that? What did it look like?
My first job
Very,
after
very,
I,
no, just very, very first job ever, ever.
oh, geez. I was a bar waitress for like 6 years. And that, I think that that was basically what sort of was the impetus for me to go to university. And I was always really interested in Indigenous rights and social justice. So basically, I knew that I didn't want to be a bar waitress till I died because I really felt like I felt really strongly about some of the social issues that we see in community. And so I quit doing that and I went to university and I was working for a youth center and outreach for a little while. And then I became a lawyer.
Um, okay, so that was quick to from there to the bar to the lawyer. So
Yeah.
I heard you say, it sounds like you had a strong connection with social justice, First Nations people in the area that you're at. So where did that come from? Who gave you, like, was that a family thing? Was that just
Yeah.
because you were wronged? Where was that at?
Yeah. So I'm obviously a settler in Canada and very fortunate to be sharing my home with the Indigenous people of this country and really appreciate that. I'm seventh generation on my mom's side. My like great grandparents settled in Canada in the 1800s. And they live very close to one of the reserves and so they had a relationship with a lot of the men, especially my grandpa, out on the reserve. And so lots of rodeoing and lots of getting dragged out there for ceremony and that sort of thing. So that was really great. And that's kind of how I grew up.
So that's first memories. You can sort of that running around on out and about in the wild. Is that sort of where it's
Yeah.
at?
My grandpa was a rancher
Yeah.
and he was a hunter and he was a cowboy poet.
Yeah.
And I got to spend a lot of time with my grandpa and my great grandpa when I was growing up. And so I was introduced to, I think, a lot of different things, including culture that a lot of people wouldn't be. Like I grew up in a town of 500 people, right? And so, you know, lots of running around in dirt roads with bare feet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So the transition into the lawyer, is there lawyers in your family? Is that what you're seeing growing up? You are what you see and all that sort of stuff. How, like, what, when you set out to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
like, were you going to save the world? Were you going to fight the
Yeah,
injustice?
that was
Like, where was that at?
so I do have one other lawyer in my family, but it's not like a bunch of the people in my family are lawyers. They're all, like I said, they're ranchers and farmers. And it was inherently tied to the fact that I like had a deep connection to social justice. Like I can remember being like 6 years old and basically like understanding what colonialism is and being appalled about it at that point. I was like, I can remember telling my grandma that the British were terrible because of what they had done all over the world. And so law school was just sort of like it made sense to me because I was working already in social justice in respect to youth. And I saw a lot of youth that were coming out of like foster care, or youth that were in foster care, or that were homeless in community, that didn't have a lot of rights and didn't have a lot of opportunities. And I thought, there's not a lot that I can do as like a youth worker or an outreach worker. And so I thought, perhaps with becoming a lawyer, I can do something around that. I had a really strong interest in doing Indigenous law, and I took every kind of Indigenous law class that I could take. And it's sort of ironic because I ended up doing immigration law, which is sort of like the exact opposite of
I was
that.
going to say that.
Right.
Odd how those things work out, isn't it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the thing. So many First Nations groups are still adjudicating land claims and are not having their rights respected in this country. Like there's been six deaths, and I could say murders around police and Indigenous people on the prairies in the last 3 weeks, and that's something that happens a lot here.
yeah, as I don't really talk about it much because I'm not Indigenous, but from my experience of being around, and a little bit similar to you, I wasn't in the countryside, I was in the city
Yeah,
growing up, sort of rough and tumble in areas, but the same issues that face First Nations people in Australia. And I still believe there's a genocide happening in Australia in relation to First Nations people. And potentially when we look back in history, once there's enough time, that
yeah,
the royal family could be almost seen equivalent of Hitler, as in
yeah.
colonization.
Yeah, and I think that that's absolutely the sentiment in Canada as well. So my organization, like I mentioned, we do a lot of institutional inreach, and Saskatchewan, the province that I'm living in right now, isn't really huge. There's only like I think under like 1.5 million people that live in this province, and I think I'm not exactly sure on the stats in respect to what percentage of that is Indigenous, but the Women's Provincial Institution is sitting at 95% Indigenous.
Yeah, and we have youth detention in Australia that has 100% Indigenous,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is just
yeah,
mind blowing. When essentially when colonization started, the Indigenous population was 100%, and now in Australia they sit at about 3%. So like
yeah.
that's
But
and
100% incarcerated,
yeah,
which, yeah,
and
which,
highly overrepresented in all sorts of
yeah,
lower socioeconomic areas and all of that sort of stuff.
absolutely.
However, one of the things that I have been told to mention is the resilience and the insight and the knowledge and some of the stories that I've been passed down.
Yeah,
That's phenomenal as far as I'm concerned.
yeah,
The Australian Indigenous population is the longest continual living humane or humanity or people in the
yeah,
world. So they're
yeah.
unbroken. They've got stories going back 80,000 years.
Time immemorial is what the legal term is, and that's true. Like, absolutely in Saskatchewan, there are so many. generational strengths. And I think that they talk a lot about 7 generations forward and how things will be repaired. And Canada as a country is always talking about truth and reconciliation, but they won't really recognize truth. And so reconciliation can't happen until that happens. And so it's something that we talk a lot about at work. And it's weird for me to be sitting in this chair because I am non-Indigenous, right? And the organization that I work for, there's 22 locals across Canada, but on the prairies, there's 4 locals, and I'm the only non-Indigenous executive director. And so, I think that it's up to me to mentor other people with lived experience and other people that are Indigenous into leadership positions so that they can actually step in and succession plan with us as an organization. It's been really important for me to make sure that I have Indigenous board members. I have 10 board members right now. 6 of them are Indigenous. I hire people with lived experience. So it's not only me that has done prison time. I think I have 5 staff that have lived experience of incarceration. We're currently working on this really cool project right now that is funded by the federal government. It's basically a project where we're going through all of our hiring practices and our onboarding and that kind of thing to reduce barriers for people with lived experience and cultural knowledge to be hired without having to have a colonial education. If people are properly supported, they can do the work, especially in respect to forward-facing service-based positions, because nobody wants to come and talk to somebody that's only been to university. Nobody wants that. They want to know that what it's like to be dope sick, or they want to know what it's like to be followed around a store because of the color of your skin. And so it's been really important, that work. And we just started that project in July, but I'm really excited because what we're doing is we're building a toolkit that we can provide to other nonprofits so that they will also be able to hire people with lived experience.
Yeah, it's something, there's so much crossover between us.
Yeah.
Having only just met 5 minutes ago was officially. I worked for previously I worked for an Aboriginal community control organization, and the goal of my job was to make myself redundant and train someone up into the space, mainly because they couldn't employ people in that space. So in Australia, you have to have like a certain certificate.
Yeah.
You've got a record, you can't have that. And I was just fortunate enough and white privileged enough to be able to negotiate my way to get that certificate.
Yeah.
And have lived experience of the justice space. So they're like, can you help us? We'll give you a job, but just so you know, you're going to be replaced by someone that's more suitable than you. And I was like, yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
That's sort of, the goal, isn't it? To empower people so they can see it and then they can do it. And I feel like I feel like we're probably in Australia, maybe 5 to 10 years behind you so I heard you say truth telling and all that sort of stuff before. We've only just taken out of our school curriculum that Australia was discovered by Captain Cook.
Oh man.
And our last Prime Minister was still spruiking that Australia was discovered by Captain Cook. Now that I've just, recently, it's like within the last week, in the schools, they're starting to teach about the frontier wars and they're starting those truth tellings. Whereas, when I went to school, Australia was discovered by Captain Cook. So that's what I was taught.
Yeah, well,
that's like that genocide rolling on.
Yeah, we have something called the doctrine of discovery here that basically suggests that that they weren't that Indigenous people didn't have their own laws or social structures, and so basically we were entitled as settlers to come over here and do whatever the hell we wanted, which was genocide, 100%. And I think that that's why I get really excited about what's going on in Palestine right now. And I've alienated myself from a lot of people, but I won't stop talking about it because I think that it's really triggering for a lot of people in this country because colonialism is still going on. This isn't something that happened yesterday.
Yes, it's like fucking right.
Yeah. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
right. And like the thing about Australia, the difference in Australia, I think not, I don't know so much about where you are, but to the States, because I've done a bit there as well, is, they kill darkest colored people in the
Yeah.
street. Whereas
Yeah.
in Australia, we take them to prison and then they die in custody.
Well,
So
we've got quite a bit of that going on too.
that's essentially sort of how that happens. And there's almost a death a week in our system. We don't have the prison population anywhere near you guys. Thank fuck for that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, like that's how it sort of meters itself out and keeps people stuck and traumatized, and the transgenerational
Yeah.
continuation of trauma.
Yeah. Absolutely. So the women's institution that I was talking about with you earlier, capacity is 166. Right now, they have 280 women in there. So they are triple bunking. Not only do they have that many women in there, but 186 of them are on remand. So they
Not
haven't even been
guilty.
convicted of a crime. And we have some serious issues around homelessness in community and addiction because of intergenerational trauma and basically a lack of support systems. When I was in BC and I came back to Saskatchewan, because I had been gone from Saskatchewan for a significant amount of time, and I was kind of shocked, and I wasn't aware that things were as bad as they are here now. And like I said to you earlier, like it gets to be minus 40 and we don't even have a shelter.
Yeah.
Like, so, it's pretty scary for us in this. And we've had three deaths in that women's institution this year. One of them was from an overdose, one was from withdrawals, and this other story is really, really terrible. But basically, she was sick for days and she was ignored. And somebody that was one of the other women that was helping take care of her, called the outside, and someone called an ambulance. They came to the institution. They took her, and she had her leg amputated, and then she died.
That's
And since since I think it was 2001, we were just pulling together numbers of how many deaths there's been in custody, right? Because there have been quite a few deaths, but they've risen exponentially since 2017 with the toxic drug supply. That makes sense, right?
Are you getting the nitrazines over there? Is that sort of filtered into your world yet?
The which?
Nitrazines?
Uh
Like fentanyl on,
oh, yeah.
but like
Yeah.
10. So yeah, that's just
Like,
starting to hit our shores at the moment.
yeah, which is, are you talking about the horse tranquilizer, right?
Oh, whatever. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're blending it with fentanyl, and it mimics the effects of opioids, but you still are dope sick because it's not an opiate.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, we're seeing quite a bit of that.
We're
Meth
having
is
massive
huge.
overdoses here because they're cutting it. They're using,
Yeah,
so they're cutting it with ice. I don't know what you call ISO, like meth. They're cutting
yeah,
it everything, cutting it with everything here. So
yeah,
pills, people are dying at kids are dying at festivals because they're not
yeah,
realizing
yeah,
what they're taking.
yeah, yeah.
So that's starting to happen here as well, and that creates a whole other level of criminalization, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We're also in this province, we have a very conservative government. We are looking at forced treatment right now.
Ouch. Yeah, I know. Yeah, no. So I done a fellowship in the Netherlands to went and have a look at that. So I feel like their system is probably the best. If you identify that you have a drug problem when you go to court,
Yeah,
you can go in, it's called forensic, but you'll go into a rehab and they'll
yeah,
treat you for the rehab and they'll help you get through all that sort of stuff over and above sending you to jail. But you might do more time in that forensic unit than you would if you got sentenced.
yeah.
But usually what happens is they'll spit you out with a house, a job, and all of that sort of stuff instead of.
Which Yeah, which is great, because if you get a provincial sentence in Canada, it's 2 years minus a day. So anything under 2 years is a provincial sentence,
Yeah, okay.
and you're street released. Like they're like, okay, go. and you don't get any supports around housing. You don't get linked in with income assistance. It's a really bad situation. If you get a federal sentence, which is 2 years plus,
Yeah.
then you usually get released on parole.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I actually only served, out of 3.5 years, I only served like 10 months.
Yeah.
And I did almost 21 months in community on parole, which was super helpful, right? Because I had housing.
Well, if you have an upbringing like ours, it's very helpful. However, if you're stuck in the lower, so I agree. Like I managed to, like I'll never shy away from it. I managed to get out of what I did
Yeah,
because of who. Yeah, I'm white and I'm privileged. I'm not going to
right,
lie.
right.
But yes, the
Yeah.
cycle of recidivism. I fucking hate that word. Sorry. So we're touching on this now. So let's just talk about the perpetual punishment that has been visited on you potentially, as a result of 10 months of incarceration and a 3.5 year prison sentence.
Yeah.
Like, what is it you still can't do? And how long ago was that? When did you finish that sentence?
I finished it. It was January 2018.
Yeah, okay. That's not that
That
long.
was when my warrant expiry was. And this is something actually I was just talking about somebody with about this morning. So when I was released in community, and I was on parole, so I had to live in parole housing, and I had some time to try to look for a job and try to figure those pieces out. But where I was serving my sentence, before my release, there was like 45 women there. It was actually at a healing lodge. I was really fortunate to get to do my time there. But out of 45 women, only 2 of us had any post-secondary education, and everybody else didn't even have a grade 12. And so at the time, like, it occurred to me, I was like, the privilege thing. I was like, I'm different than all of my Indigenous sisters that I'm in this institution with, and that I'll be able to get out and I'll be able to get a job and everything will be fine. But the truth of the matter was, when I got out, it wasn't that easy,
Yeah.
because I had an 8-year gap in my employment history. I was applying for jobs at, clothing stores and, low, minimum wage jobs. And people were like, why is somebody that was a lawyer applying for a job in a clothing store? And at first, like, I wasn't transparent about the fact that I was in recovery. I wasn't transparent about the fact that I had been to prison, because I was carrying a lot of shame,
Yeah, yeah.
and
But the
so
stigma
I
that's been
managed.
given to us in that space as well. It's not,
Yeah,
I disagree with Brene Brown a little bit. Like, shame is a gift that's been given to me by somebody else through their judgment. It's up to me
right.
whether I just go, yes, okay, heap the shame on me, or hey,
Yeah,
I've done that, I've reconciled that, and I don't do it anymore. So
yeah,
do your best if you
yeah,
want to get at me.
yeah. But that was
But
that
that's
was
a
the
process
challenge.
too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was the challenge. And what turned that around was I got off of parole. And since I was basically still hiding in plain sight and lying about the fact that I'd been to prison and not really talking about my recovery too much, and I relapsed.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I relapsed. So after
Like that?
33 months,
Yeah, yeah.
I went back out. I went down to the States. By the way, not supposed to be in the States. I'm not allowed to travel to the States. Went down to the States, promptly relapsed, and went back out for another 4 months to do a little bit of research. And I'm lucky I didn't get a prison sentence down there, because I was right back at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can remember, like, I just one day woke up and I was like, I can't, what are you doing? Like, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I thought about the fact that I have privilege. And I thought about the fact that I had these 2 university degrees. And I thought about the fact that I'm so absolutely, you know, basically committed to social justice and changing things for the women that I was institutionalized with that don't have that privilege. And I knew that I would be able to get into rooms, and I knew that I could build a bridge with the privilege that I had to help people. And I was like, you know what? fuck it, excuse my language, but I just started telling everybody that listened. I was like, so yeah, I've been to prison, and I really feel like I need to be using my lived experience for good, not evil. And things started to sort of happen really quickly for me around that time because I was so transparent. And I was kind of a bit of a white whale in that I had a law degree and I had a sociology degree and I had already worked in, with nonprofits, and now I had lived experience. And that said, my lived experience is a lot different than the women that I was incarcerated with. I'm a white woman with 2 university degrees, and that occurred to me every day, not only when I was hiding what I'd been through, but then every day after I was transparent. Because, I don't face the same barriers and I don't face the same challenges. And so it's really, really important to me to acknowledge that things were easier for me in that way.
Yeah, and the other thing I like to reconcile is it's somewhat relevant, you know what I mean? Like I assume that we can both get into rooms. So when I was working for the Aboriginal Community Controlled Organisation, whenever we'd have
Yeah.
to go to the government, because I was the only white guy there, whenever we
Yeah.
had to go to the government, they go, you go in and talk to the government because that's not what we do. Can you go and sort that out? If we had to go to the police station, can you go and sort that out? Because that's not what we do. So,
Right.
privileged enough to be aware of, hey, you're the token white guy, just go in and sort the government out for us scenario.
Yeah.
But, and willing to do that work and acknowledging that, while I did, I had a good upbringing and all that sort of stuff. I still did fall on hard times, and the emotions and the barriers and the stigmas that come still
Yeah.
impacted me. And it sounds like, what I'm guessing is when you relapse or went into that, whatever you lapse, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
like hiding who you were sort of fed that. And
Yeah.
they're the barriers and the discriminations that we're trying to remove to let people have, we have a thing in Australia called truth in sentencing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would love to have truth in sentencing because I finished my sentence. I finished my sentence in 2001. I done a 4-year prison sentence in 2001. I was sentenced to 4 years. I haven't been in trouble with the police since, yet I
Yeah.
still experience points of discrimination, specifically around employment nowadays.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's not so out there at the moment because the thing is, if we both went for a job, same qualifications, blah, 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 and then they go, oh, wait a minute, this guy's got a criminal record, it just becomes easier to employ the other person.
Yeah. Yeah,
If
for
we
sure
don't
it
know
is.
how to mitigate the risk of the record
Right.
23 years later.
Yeah. No, and that absolutely is a challenge. I feel pretty fortunate to have the job that I do have right now. And like I am getting in rooms with ministers and the provincial government quite often, and I've gotten over $700,000 in funding from them this year, and we'll get another additional probably 600,000 from them next year. And it's so interesting for me because like I'll have these conversations or I'm in meetings about funding and that sort of thing, and everybody knows I've been to prison. Everybody knows I've been to prison. And I did, and like I said before I relapsed, like that's where the challenge was. But now I think that I'm just so absolutely open about it that it just isn't really a challenge anymore. I was trying to get reinstated to practice law again, and that
No, don't
that
do it.
yeah, they listen, they don't want me. They wanted me to prove that I was in active addiction, and they wanted all my health records, and they wanted me to prove, or why
Jump through all the
basically they wanted
hoops.
all my police records.
Yeah.
I've got a big envelope with a USB drive in it that probably has a bunch of mugshots. I haven't even looked at it because I was like, I feel like Creator has me where I'm supposed to be,
Yeah.
and I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't really want to go back and be a lawyer because, yeah.
Part of the problem, as far as I'm concerned, not the solution. But anyway, that's my opinion. Lawyers and
Um,
criminologists Like most of them, oddly enough, over the last 5 or 6 years, that's who I've become friends with the most, like lawyers and
Yeah.
criminologists, but they're the bane of my existence. The language we're given by criminologists, and then lawyers, yeah, anyway. It's always good to have a good friend that's a lawyer.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, but so yeah, I think the what's come forward for me, having just met you, is the common thread of the discrimination and the disadvantage that results from contact with the criminal justice system, which I call perpetual punishment. So
Yeah.
to get out from under that, it's like, okay, even when you get released on parole, you think
Yeah.
you're going to give me parole, but then you put all these conditions on me, all these onerous
Right.
conditions. It's like, if you don't think I'm competent to live in the community, then why are you letting me go? And why are you going to put all these onerous conditions on me? And
Yeah.
how do I get out from under that? Especially, you know, not having the privilege or the insights around how to negotiate my way out of these situations, which
Right.
I think the common thread, and it gives me hope to know that there's people on the other side of the world doing exactly the same work that I'm trying to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think I love the term perpetual punishment, because I think that that's actually really relevant to, not necessarily what I faced. I mean, so what, I can't get into the States. That doesn't make me real sad. I don't want to go down there anyway. But
Oh,
I think about the women that I do support,
yeah.
and how, there are so many barriers that exist already. And basically, if you talk about like foster care, and you talk about other institutions, and you talk about just basically some structural issues, and how that basically paints the world and how they view people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this, and it's, I think, somewhat controversial, and I say it a lot, and they cringe when I say it, but we have serious problems with racism in this province, like absolutely serious problems with racism. And I don't think that anyone can argue that, despite the fact that they don't want to talk about it, or they want to be all polite about it. But when you look at the fact that 95% of the women in that institution are Indigenous, that is all because of, colonial structures and racism, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think, that's, well, colonization brought prison to Australia, and we were a
Yeah.
penal colony. Like that was
Yeah.
sent.
I knew that.
So it's crazy to think that, but just
Yeah.
um, like what I'm trying to do at the moment is, from what I've learned from my fellowship, is how can I bring humane practices into trauma-inducing environments, which is prison as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
and other, even like rehab facilities. We have a punitive model.
Yeah.
So if you can't jump through that hoop, you're not going to get this. And what
Right.
generally happens is when people are at their greatest need, we remove support.
Yeah.
So the punitive model sees as the increase for help increase as the need for help increases, so
Yeah.
too do the onerous conditions become to access that support and help. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely.
how do we, I'm trying to do more humane practices. People
Yeah.
are talking about trauma informed. Like I'm sort of past that at the moment. Like if we
Yeah.
just treat each other humanely as a
Yeah.
base level, and that's my understanding how a lot of prisons were closed in the Netherlands. They made a decision to treat people more humanely, which
Right.
reduced the need for prison.
Yeah, that's not going to happen in this province. I can tell you that right now. And like our national organization that I've recently sort of backed away from a little bit. I was on their board, and they monitor conditions of confinement. That is basically their statement of purpose. Like, they do regional advocacy work, and they do institutional inreach, but for the purpose of monitoring conditions of confinement. And unfortunately, although I think that work is important in some ways, it doesn't help people stay out of institutions, and that's what we need to look at. I do want to mention, though, I love your shirt.
Thank you.
I'm constantly having arguments with people about the term offender, and I just it drives me absolutely like I cringe when I hear it, even inmate. Like I don't I always have to
People
educate
first
people. Like,
language. People first.
yeah,
People
yeah,
impacted by the criminal justice system. And they're like, oh, that could be anyone. That's the fucking point. Let's include everybody. Like the mothers of
exactly.
the kids,
Yeah,
the parents that are in jail, like people impacted by the justice system ripples throughout society.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that I'm always like trying to point out. It's not just the women that are in the institutions, it's their children.
And the
And
families and like the sisters and the brothers and like the
right.
people that come and visit and give up their time
Yeah.
to get in and out. Like it's such my experience with prison is such a violent, like prison is just full of scared little boys, really,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
marching around trying to be the like the big one. And that I
Yeah.
get it because that's how it is.
Yeah.
But like to put someone in a cage, poke them with a stick and make them angry, and then just release them and think that they're going to function above the level that they entered it, like that's just deluded.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, yeah. Our time is coming to an end. Thank
Yes.
you very much. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and hours. I'm
Yeah,
still
I'm
working
pretty sure
on
too.
how I'm going to smuggle you into Australia somehow.
We're thinking about coming to New Zealand next year to do a knowledge exchange.
Yeah, yeah,
And
cool.
there's a chance that I might be able to get a waiver.
Yeah.
So,
If you
who
need
knows?
a recommendation, don't ask me. No. I don't know how much weight it can carry. That's all I'm saying. But no, I'd be happy to spruik your wares and get you into the country and attend a few events and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, for
really,
sure.
thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
look forward to, talking more in the future.
For sure.
Take care, Nicole, and have a great
Yeah, you too, Dean. Okay, thank you. Bye.